What's up, Ocean? You got Matt here. Today I'm bringing you a tier list on the best fire type Pokemon in competitive Pokemon. We're going to be talking a bit about every single format there is, singles for Smogon, we're going to look at VGC as well, and of course my favorite, which is going to be Draft League. So if you guys are excited for the video, then do me a favor and leave a like on the video and comment, of course, your thoughts on the tier list down below, and I'll also link a copy of the tier list in the description as well, because I couldn't find one that included all the Gen 9 Pokemon. So we have here an alphabetical list for all the Pokemon in, well, up to Generation 9, at least for the fire types. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Before I'm going to move forward, I am just going to mark down quickly, this is going to be for NFVs, because NFVs are kind of, well, not part of this. They really don't do much in the current metagames, so I want to kind of put NFVs separately. Starting off though with the first one, it's going to be Hisuian Arcanine. Now Hisuian Arcanine, I think actually going to have a lot of utility as a really good offensive breaker. And actually, even before I continue all of this, I'm going to add a row below, and we're going to make it a different color as well. This row here is going to be a nice dark green. Is that what it is? Yeah, dark green. I couldn't think of the word, for example. I was like looking over the side, like, what's the word here that I'm thinking of? And I just could not find it. Anyways, so we're going to look at this as NFVs. We're going to be over here, and then we're going to go up here and put this into our D tier. So we'll go with this. Now, Hisuian Arcanine, I think is actually going to go into the C tier. The reason why is because S tier is going to be for like the best of the best Pokemon. A tier is going to be they have a really significant role in the metagame. B tiers are going to be they have a really strong option, but are more mid tier. And then C, I think, is going to be we start looking at a bit of a niche. And I think that Hisuian Arcanine, the fact that it has a 4x weakness to water and to ground is pretty bad based on its typing. It is pretty cool that it gets Rock Head with like the Head Smash, which is awesome. But I just feel like based on all of that, it's not going to be as scary. Regular Arcanine, though, I think is going to be the B tier. Having Intimidate is amazing. It's definitely one of the best Pokemon in VGC because it has Intimidate. It's got great typing all around. There's a couple other Pokemon that are better than it right now, but historically it's shown it's an amazing Pokemon in the competitive metagame. Armarouge is going to go into the A tier because we're looking at VGC and singles. In singles, it's nowhere near as good, but right now a weakness policy weak armor set is amazing for Armarouge, especially when you pair that with like Terra Psychic and going for U-turn. Let's say like especially offensive Dragapult with no attack investment, it could do a lot of damage against an Armarouge. Next up, we're going to go cover Blaziken first. Now, I'll actually add in another tier just below this because I want to keep Mega Pokemon separate, because I'll be honest, Megas are not going to be part of the game. They won't, okay? And because I just feel like it makes no sense for me to talk about them, so we're going to put Megas off to the side. So we'll do Mega Blaziken over here. Speed Boost Blaziken is going to be good. However, I do feel like it's been overblown. In previous generations for singles, it's been sent to Uber straight away, but I think in this metagame, it'll be put into the A tier. There's so many more powerful Pokemon compared to Blaziken and Speed Boost Blaziken at that I feel it's not going to be as impressive. Braixen is going to go over here. Mega Camerupt is a Mega, and then we have Camerupt going to go into the D tier. This is a bad Pokemon tier. It'll be housed over here. Carkol is NFV, but honestly, it could probably go up into the D tier because it actually has some utility in some really low tier formats. Next up is going to be Gmax Centiskorch, and you know what? One more. We're going to do another row just below this one here. I can go ahead and add that in, and this row is going to be in the purple shade, and we're going to go ahead and call this the Gmax tier. Okay, so starting off with our Gmax tier is going to be Gmax Centiskorch. Then we have the regular Centiskorch. I'll put into the C tier. It has utility as a Flash Fire user, has a lot of good moves. Leech Life, Knockoff, Fire Lash is a really good move as well. So a lot of useful options there. Thirledge is really solid. I do think though that it's going to end up in the B tier. Originally, I was thinking that this Pokemon is going to end up higher than that because it'll end up probably in something like the. I'm going to try and readjust my screen here. 1 second. Is that a bit better? That is almost better. I have one of my ads almost peeking out here. I'm just going to adjust this a bit. Can I move this around? There we go. That's going to cover decently well. So the reason why I think that Thirledge is not going to be as good as Armarouge is because of the VGC situations. It has certain advantages that it can't have in singles, and it's really good in singles. But the fact that you have to deal with Intimidate, the fact that it has an immunity to its ghost type attack, and its ghost type attacks aren't as powerful as the psychic type attacks that Armarouge has, it's a little unfortunate. And special is just usually better than physical most of the time, so I'll put it into the B tier. Chandelure is also going to go into the B tier. It's still a really good offensive special Pokemon. It does a lot of good things. The issue with it is its speed is much lower than you'd like it to be. Obviously, Pokemon like Thirledge and Armarouge are pretty slow as well, but I think Thirledge is 85 and Armarouge is 75, while Chandelure is 80. I do find that the difference is really it's big enough to the point that there is enough of a discrepancy, even though that in this metagame 85 is not that fast at all. Next up is going to be Charcadet, NFE. We're gonna have G-Max Charizard, and we're gonna have the 2 Mega Zards over here with regular Charizard going straight into the D tier, but the top of D tier, because it does have a couple of really niche sets that do a lot of work. The issue that I have with it is that because it doesn't get defog anymore, it loses out on a lot of viability, which does hurt it a lot. Charmander and Charmeleon will go over here. Chi-Yu I'm going to toss all the way into the S tier. This Pokemon is so much better than I even expected it to be. I knew it was going to be good, I just didn't expect it to be this good, and that is a problem. The fact that it's able to break through basically anything with Beads of Ruin is crazy. Such an amazing special attacker, great speed at base 100 in this metagame right now. The fact you can Terastallize into a fire or a dark type is really good for a Pokemon like this, and you can punish basically any of the switches to this Pokemon. I really like Chi-Yu a lot and definitely deserving of an S tier status. Chimchar, you can go over here. Cinderace with Libero. I think Libero Cinderace is actually going to go into the S tier as well. Really strong option, really good physical breaking Pokemon. Has a lot of good things going for it. Maybe if I make this smaller, that can be a bit better. That's a bit better for you guys. Yeah. So as I was saying, really good physical breaking option, super fast, has momentum, has core change as well in a metagame that right now doesn't have a lot of hazard removal. It works really well in a lot of situations, and the fact that it's so fast is a big advantage for it. Next up is going to be G-Max, what is this thing called? Colossal with regular Colossal. Colossal I'll put into the C tier. I know it has some applications in VGC. However, I do find that it's kind of falling off because there's no Gigantamaxing right now. That was one of the big advantages that it had to boost its HP stat by, well, ×2. That's a big deal. And the fact that you have that, plus you have access to the Steam Engine and weakness policy, means that you can have a really good, hard-hitting, fast Pokemon like Colossal. It's just you don't have access to that as much anymore in VGC, and in singles it's really used just as like a decent spinner and hazard setter. So I'll put it into the C tier. Next up is Combuskin. This has some utility in the D tier, but really not as much as Carkol in my mind. Crocodile into the NFEs. We're gonna put, oh, this goes over here. These go like this, my mistake. Next is gonna be Galar Darmanitan, the, what is it called? I can't think of the name, the Zen mode Galar Darmanitan. This one here, now, regular Galar Darmanitan is better. I'll put into the A tier, has a lot of good things going for it. In VGC, it's not all that. In Draft League, it's good, but it's not like top tier over here. I'd say Draft League is more like over here in the B tier, and VGC it's below the A tier as well. But in singles, it was, in Smogon at least, it was really strong. Because of that, I'll put into the A tier for now. But the Zen mode, I think, kind of falls down to maybe like the C tier, because it's really hard to activate, but when you do activate it, it's really strong. It's a solid Pokemon overall, but it's just such a weird ability. I don't know. I find like I'd much rather have a regular Guerrilla Tactics Galardarm than a Zen mode Galardarm. Speaking of Darm, we're gonna go with regular Darm. This will go into the B tier. This is a really good, solid, fast, hard-hitting Pokemon. The fact that it has a really chunky HP set is really nice in a lot of situations because your defensive stats are kind of lackluster. And the good news is, because you have such a high HP stat, when you go for a Flare Blitz, you're not going to be taking too much in recoil because you're only taking an actual, not a percentage of your HP, but a specific number based on the damage that you've dealt, which is a really big deal. You also have access to U-Turn, and the advent of heavy-duty boots are a big advantage to this Pokemon, just like for all the Fire-type Pokemon in this generation. Also, I don't know why I have Galardarm here. This is an Ice type. I should let me. What am I doing? Let's toss this over here into the no pile. I'll put this down all the way at the very bottom of my list here, so I don't put it back in. My bad. This is a Fire type here. This Darmanitan is a Fire type. My B. Delphox. Delphox into the C tier as well. It's got good speed. I believe it's like 109-ish, around that range. And it's pretty fast with having access to Magician. Could be kind of nice in the right situation. The issue with it is it just never feels that strong. That's part of the problem with it. Just compared to the other starter Pokemon of that generation, the other starter Pokemon in general, it really doesn't have as much going for it. Now, obviously, I have Charizard lower than it, but that's because its typing is just worse, and it relies a lot on Mega Evolutions and Gigantamaxes to be viable, but Delphox really is not that impressive compared to other Fire-type starters. Next up is going to be Entei. So Entei I will shove into... If this was Gen 7, it could definitely go into B tier. I feel like right now, though, it kind of belongs more into the C tier because there's just better options available as Fire types. And Fire type Pokemon, typically, you're going to look at in VGC running an Arcanine or an Armarouge, or eventually it's going to be a Chi-Yu. If you really want to run a physical Fire type, you're better off even running Cerulege because you have the immunity to fire, which is super nice. That's really where I'm looking at this. And in singles, yeah, you have access to Sacred Fire, you have Extreme Speed and Stone Edge. It just feels so lackluster compared to other options, and that's why I'll put it into the C tier. Fennekin is an NFE. Flareon is going to go into our D tier. Now, Guts Flareon has a lot of utility. It's a really solid Pokemon in that regard. It also has a way to be immune to Fire-type attacks. The problem with it, though, is that it's so slow. Its stats are really not allocated in the right way, in my mind, and its coverage is just fine at best. So I'll keep it into the D tier. Fuecoco, yes, I know we want to put Fuecoco into the S tier. You know, I'll just shove Fuecoco into the S tier. This thing is so adorable. Next up, we have Primal Groudon straight to the S tier. I believe this is the best Fire-type in the game. Well, it's not even in Scarlet and Violet, but it's the best fire type ever created. One of them at least. It is so insanely strong, amazing breaker, an amazing defensive core, can do basically anything on any given team. The fact that it gets rid of rain and just keeps rain away is such a huge deal for this Pokemon. It makes it so that water attacks are just evaporating. It's such a big deal and an amazing Pokemon in every single format it could possibly be in. Hisuian Growlithe is a, well, you know, NFE. Growlithe is an NFE as well. Heatmore is going to go into the D tier. This Pokemon had such promise and it just flopped so hard. It has a decent coverage, but its stats are not good at all, and that's kind of the problem. If its stats were better, it would be a lot better. Next is going to be Heatran. This will go into the A tier. Having access to both Flash Fire and Flame Body now is such a huge advantage for this compared to a lot of other fire type Pokemon. The fact that it is a steel type as well, so you quad resist Fairy is huge. Yes, you have that 4 times weakness to ground, and that makes it hard, especially when your ground type Pokemon and your fire type Pokemon are the same thing, and it makes it so that they're, well, weak to the same type in ground there rather. It's tough, but it has so much going for it, with whether it's the Scarf Eruption sets, or whether it's going to be just Eruption in the Sun, or whether it's going to be a Lava Plume set that's just meant to spread burns around, or it's meant to be a hazard set, or it can do a lot of different things for a team. So I do feel like the A tier is definitely appropriate. Honestly, I put it like this, to be honest. Ho-Oh will go into our S tier as well. Ho has a lot going for it with Regenerator in this game. The fact that boots are a thing as well means that you can always regen health back. You don't have to run Roost on this Pokemon. That's huge after the nerf to Roost and Recover and all the PP on those moves, which is great. Having Sacred Fire is awesome. It's got a ridiculously high physical attack stat. It's an amazing breaker on that side, and my favorite set to run is Choice Banded Ho. Such an amazingly fun set to see in competitive Pokemon. Next up is going to be Mega Houndoom into the Mega slot up here. We're going to see the Houndoom itself, which will go towards the bottom of D tier. Yeah, Flash Fire is a thing. It's just, power creep is a thing in Pokemon, and while this Pokemon is a lot of people's favorites because of the way it looks, the design, has the fact that it's a dark and fire type, so cool here, it's lacking a lot, and Mega Houndoom did a lot for this Pokemon, and even that Pokemon wasn't even that viable. So keep that in mind when you roast me about my tier list in the comments. Next up is going to be Houndour. This will go into our NFE tier list. We're going to have Incineroar. Incineroar will go all the way to the top into S tier. Now, here's the thing with Incineroar. In Draft League, it would be like B tier. At the most A tier, but probably B tier. In Smogon, it's like C tier. But the fact that it is the best Pokemon in VGC for last generation, and I'm sure when it comes to the game, it'll be very strong in this generation because it'll resist the stabs of Chi-Yu, it'll resist the stabs of Chien-Pao. It's going to be an amazingly strong Pokemon. It's such a hard-hitting Pokemon. The fact that it's going to resist the Flutter Mane attacks other than Moonblast, but still, it's going to be able to do a lot of damage to them. It's going to be so well-rounded that I have to put into the S tier. It's going to be amazing in one format, so amazing that I'm going to actually put it and say disregard the fact that it's average to below average in the other two formats in competitive Pokemon. Next up is Infernape. Infernape, I'm going to toss into the A tier. I think Infernape has a lot going for this generation. It's really fast, has access to Mach Punch, and it has access to a lot of really good coverage on both the physical and the special side. Where it's lacking a little bit is that it doesn't have a really strong and really high attack or special attack stat. A lot of the Pokemon that we see on this list, like Chi-Yu has ridiculous special attack. Cinderace is a much higher speed, also has a really good attack stat, better than in Infernape. Armarouge, insane special attack rather. These Pokemon have that one killer stat. Infernape doesn't have that, and that's why I think I have to put it this low, at least into the A tier on my tier list. Next up is going to be Iron Moth. Iron Moth is definitely an A tier Pokemon. Being fire and poison is fine. It's 4 times weak to ground, which sucks. The good thing is that it absorbs T-Spikes. It's got really high base speed at like 110, and it has amazing coverage, like really, really good coverage. This thing has like D-Gleam, gets access to, I think it's Hurricane still, which is awesome. Gets access to Psychic moves, which is amazing. It has so much coverage, which is honestly one of the biggest advantages for this. Agility is a really popular set to see on it, and I think in VGC, while it may not have as much usefulness as it would in singles or in Draft League, it's still going to be a big threat. The problem is there's just better fire types to run in VGC, like Armarouge, like Incineroar when it comes to the game, and of course Chi-Yu. Moving on, there's going to be Larvesta in the NFE, Litleo into the NFE, Litten, NFE, Magby, NFE, that's 4 in a row, Magcargo, let's toss you all the way down into the D tier. Now this Pokemon, my god, just give it Water Absorb, okay? Please, it makes so much sense for this thing to have Water Absorb, but it just doesn't, and that makes it such a bad Pokemon. It really has nothing going for it. Magmar, NFE as well, but honestly, I'll put it into the D tier because I've seen people run it because of like Teleport, even though Teleport is not really in the game right now, but we'll see how that goes once Pokemon Home comes out. Magmortar, I'll shove into the bottom of D tier as well. It misses out on a lot. It has a lot of utility in certain areas as a really hard breaker on the special side, but like, The problem with it is it's slow, it's not that bulky, its coverage is fine, its special attack is not as high as you'd like it to be. It just feels lackluster compared to all the other options. That's why no one really uses it, and when it is used, it's not used to the success that you'd like it to see. And because of that, we're gonna put it into the D tier. Next up is the Alolan Marowak. I know when this thing was in VGC, it was like top tier. It was really good, but I'm gonna put it into the A tier because it's not as good as Incineroar. It does get access to like Lightning Rod and Curse Body, and it gets access to Rocket. All three abilities are really solid. It has sets that are really good with like the Will-O-Wisp spamming. It has sets that are really good offensively in Trick Room. It can do a lot of things for a team. I just find that since Gen 7 when it got introduced, it kind of fell off in previous generations, and because of that, I'm going to put it into the A tier, even though I've seen a lot of success with it. I just can't put it into the S tier. Next up is going to be Moltres. Moltres I'll put into the B tier. I like Moltres a lot. I think it's one of my favorite Pokemon out of Generation 8, or from Gen 1 that was in Generation 8, because it's an amazing pivot, has access to U-Turn, has access to Boots, of course, Flame Body is great, Roost for recovery, has access to Hurricane, fire moves, including Mystical Fire, Scorching Sands as well that it had. It was super valuable. I just wish that I wish I kind of would keep some of the same buffs in Generation 9, but unfortunately it's going to lose some of them, which is just, it sucks. It sucks. Next up though is going to be Monferno, which is going to be shoved into the NFB tier, as well as we have Ninetales, which will go into the C tier just off the fact that it has Drought. That alone will shove it into the C tier. There are better options to get you Sun. There are better options like, well, Groudon for example, but there are better options that can do these things for you, and Sun is not as strong as other weather, and that's why I have to put it into the C tier. I do find that the fact that you have to choose between the Heat Rock and the Boots is a little problematic, because that means you're basically choosing, well, do I want longevity or do I want to have the high length of time for my Sun? That's kind of a tough call there. So because of that, C tier. If Fire wasn't weak to Rock, I would put it a bit higher, that's for sure. Next up is Oricorio, the Fire form. Oricorio, the Fire form, will go into the D tier. Revelation Dance, whatever it's called, it is a cool move. It just doesn't do as much as you'd like it to. Its ability is very much, its ability is Dancer, by the way. It's very much reliant on what you're doing, what your opponent's doing, and anything that involves you relying on what your opponent's doing is not that consistent, and you really want to make sure that you can do your own thing whenever you're on the field as well, not being forced to say, oh, if my opponent does this, I'm in a great spot. Then you just don't have to do that in other games. So keep that in mind. Next up is going to be Pansear into the NFE tier. We have Pignite, NFE, we have Ponyta, NFE, and then we have, if I said NFT for some reason, I apologize. I don't know why I said that. We have Pyroar next. Pyroar in this generation, I think, is going to be so good. I'm actually going to put it into the C tier. I think this thing has a lot going for it. It's got a really, really good special options like Dark Pulse and Hyper Voice. The fire moves, of course, has a really good way to break with those attacks because it's a good special attacker. It's got decent speed as well. And the fact that you can terrestrialize as well with it is amazing. And I do think that's going to have a much bigger niche in a Scarlet and Violet meta than in a Sword and Shield meta, for example. Next up is going to be Quilava in the NFE. We're going to see Reboot. Reboot I'll put into the D tier because I've actually seen Libero Reboot put in some work. It's decently fast at base 94 speed and has a decent coverage. Not as good as Cinderace, but it's still solid nonetheless. So because of that, I'll shove it into the D tier. Rapidash, it is a Flash Fire Pokemon. That's kind of one of the only reasons why I would put it over here. But in general, I'll keep it there. It's fast. It's got really good coverage. Like gets like Play Rough, and it gets like Ground Move, Stomping Tantrum, or High Horsepower. Actually, it gets Mega Horn. It gets like Psycho Cut still, I believe, or no, Zen Headbutt is the one this one gets. Either way, it gets a ton of great options, and I feel like having access to Rapidash as a low tier fire type in Pokemon Draft League or in Smogon is really good. But in VGC, you're never going to see it run. Never. It makes no sense. Next up is Reshiram. This will be shoved directly into the S tier. I'm going to put it over here like this. I find that Reshiram being incredibly bulky as it is, the fact that it's a dragon that is not weak to Fairy is huge. You run Boots on this, you run Roost, you run Flame Charge, you run Draco, you have access to your Turbo Blaze ability. You're basically just able to break through everything. Such an amazing Pokemon that will really stand the test of time because of an amazing special attacks that this thing has. Really an awesome Pokemon in any format at all. Rotom Heat is going to go directly to the A tier. In terms of Draft League and Smogon, it is definitely an A tier Pokemon. It is not S tier, it's not bannable like some things like Chi-Yu and Libero Cinderace, and of course the Uber Pokemon here are, and of course Fuecoco. But it does have a lot of utility in both VGC and in singles formats, and that's really one of the reasons why I have it this high into the A tier. It does a lot of good things. It's unfortunate though, it lost access to Defog this generation and lost Pain Split as well, which definitely hurt it in my mind, at least on the singles side. Doubles not as much, but it still does hurt, that's for sure. Next up is going to be Salandit, definitely into the NFE tier, and then of course Salazzle, which I'll shove into the C tier. Salazzle having access to Corrosion is really good to poison steals and poison types. The only issue is you're already beating most steel type Pokemon with your fire type attacks. So I don't find it to be that necessary, we'll call it that. Either way, still a really good Pokemon nonetheless in terms of speed, in terms of the way that has access to dragon moves, has access to a really wide range of coverage options as well. And it just, the fact that it breaks through, it's a fire type that while it resists fairies, it is now able to break through fairies really effectively because it's also a poison type, and that's really awesome. Scorbunny is next into the NFE tier. We're going to have Scovillain. Oh my god, in random battles, this thing, S tier for sure, it's really good. But in Smogon, in Draft League, in doubles, unless you're running Sun, it is going to the D tier. And if you're not running Sun, just shove it to the bottom. It's really not great. D tier for Scovillain, that's for sure. Next up is going to be Simisear, that's the one. This will also go into the D tier. Has really solid coverage options, got great speed, I believe it's 105 on this thing. Has access to a solid way to set up with Nasty Plot, which is nice. Has, again, really good options in terms of coverage and utility moves. The issue is there are so many better options. Its ability is like Gluttony or Blaze, and those are not the best abilities to have on a fire-type Pokemon. When you have abilities like Libero on Cinderace, Intimidate on Incineroar, Levitate, Beads of Ruin, Speed Boost, Iron Fist, Flash Fire. It makes it so hard to go with a Simisear when you have access to all these other better Pokemon that also have better abilities. So this really doesn't have a niche in the format, which is a problem. Skeledirge. Oh my god, I was wrong about Skeledirge. I thought it was going to be the worst of the starters. I thought they were all going to be really good, but it is really, really good. I'm going to put Skeledirge here. I actually think it's better than the Blaziken. And one of the reasons why is there are basically, I mean, let me put it this way. In singles, this can basically wall the entire meta. If you Terrasilize into a water type, into a fairy type, you're basically in a really good spot because you can kind of take care of pretty much anything. And that's one of the things I love about Skeledirge. It has access to recovery and unaware, which is huge. Has Torch Song, so you don't have to ever worry about having a low special attack because you Torch Song once, you're at +1, and you're basically stronger than you would have been if you had maxed out your special attack and gone modest. Skeledirge is crazy, definitely one of the best Pokemon to come out of this generation, and one of the best fire types out there. Honestly, I'd probably put it like this. VGC is just really keeping up on Marouche here. Honestly, let me do something like this. Like this. I'll do something like this. This is what I look at here. Next up though is going to be Slugma, NFE, Talonflame. I have a really low opinion of Talonflame. I think it's one of the worst Pokemon out there, but people love it, and I do see the appeal of it. But it is not Gen 6 anymore. This thing doesn't have the pre-nerf Gale Wings. So I'm going to shove it into the C tier. It's basically just a flame body Pokemon that relies a lot on 30% to hope and pray that it can beat a Pokemon. That is the way I see it. But hey, I'm entitled to my opinion, just like you guys are, so let me know down in the comments. Next up is going to be a Fire Paldean Tauros. That was actually the last guide that I had done on the channel. Paldean Tauros Fire is going to be into the D tier. No, I'll put into the C tier because it has some utility in singles and in doubles. I find that the regular Tauros is worse, the water Tauros is better, but this has enough utility to the point where I'd say I could confidently take it above any of the Pokemon in the D tier, maybe even above Pyroar, definitely above Colossal. And yeah, I put it probably like this at the bare minimum. I think it's a super solid Pokemon, great speed, 100 base speed is nice, great attack, having access to a couple of really solid abilities, a lot of coverage. Raging Bull is a great move. So yeah, I can definitely see it into the C tier. Next up is Tepig. We're going to see the Torchic. We're going to see, I'm going to go over and get all of my baby forms, and that's actually all of them I'm going to talk about for now. So we'll cover that soon. Next up is Torkoal. Torkoal is going to go directly into the top of B tier. Now, why the top of B tier? Because in early generations, the Sun strategy with Torkoal is a much better strategy in VGC and doubles than it is basically the rest of the metagame. So eventually it'll go down. However, it is clearly the best Sun setter because it has Hazard and it has Hazard removal, which is a big deal. It also has Shell Smash. So in case you forget about Torkoal, well, you Shell Smash up and you're in a situation where you're +2 and attack, special attack, and speed, and you're able to break through things quite easily. So that's definitely an option. So keep that in mind when you're looking at a Torkoal build on your team. Torracat. Torracat will be D tier. Normally I would say NFE, but the fact, again, it gets Intimidate, it gets access to the Violet, has momentum moves as well. It has a lot of utility in a Draft League format and in really low tiers of Smogon. Definitely won't see as much play, of course, in VGC, but I do think that it deserves a special mention to go at least into the D tier above basically all the Pokemon in the NFE tier over here. Next up, Turtonator, also into the D tier. Fire Dragon, you'd think it'd be a great typing because Reshiram is a great type, but my god, this Pokemon is so unimpressive. It's too slow to use its best move successfully. Its best move is Shell Smash, and it can't really use that. That's the problem. The fact that it can't use its best move, I don't like that at all. It's just the situation that it's in, and unfortunately, that's what you kind of have to go with a Pokemon like Turtonator. Next of those is going to be Hisuian Typhlosion. I kind of wish this thing was a bit better, to be honest. I'll shove it into the B tier just because I don't have as much experience with it as I'd like. Its typing is really cool, has a lot of really good moves, has access to a great special move pool. I just feel like its typing was done dirty. I believe its type is not typing, its ability. Its ability, I believe, is Frisk, as it's a hidden ability, and that, my god, is just awful compared to regular Typhlosion, which has access to Flash Fire. But I'm going to put regular Typhlosion into the C tier because I believe that Hisuian Typhlosion has an advantage with the fact that it has access to the Ghost typing. That is a big deal to me. There's a lot of Fire Ghost types. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 just on this first little section over here. And I do feel that while they're good, Typhlosion I would say is like the worst of the bunch, and that's just my opinion. Next up is going to be Victini. Victini I'll put into the A tier. Has a lot of utility in singles, mostly. In doubles, I don't think it's ever been allowed actually in VGC. So just keep that in mind. It is a really good Pokemon at breaking because a V-Crate is 180 base power. It's really hard. Yeah, it has the stat drops, but it also triggers an eject pack, which is nice. You can go for a V-Create, switch out to something else, and you can be in a really good position from there. It's a very common strategy. It's got great coverage options. It's got, again, great stat distribution at 100 all around. Having access to U-turn is nice. Can be physical or special. Defensively, it can do a lot of good things as well, and boots just make this Pokemon a lot better. So I do think Victini makes a lot of sense in the A tier. Volcanion, the only Pokemon with Scald left in the game. Just for that automatic B tier, Scald is one of the best moves in the game for sure. Having access to Water Absorb is really nice as a fire type. Having access to Defog still is amazing. Having access to Steam Eruption, awesome. There's so many good things this thing has going for it, but my god, its speed is so lackluster, and its defensive typing is not as impressive as you'd like it to be. And the fact that its stat distribution is not that great, it makes it tough to say, you know, Volcanion is absolutely incredible. It just isn't. It's a solid Pokemon, has access to one of the best moves out there, but that's kind of what we get here. We get Pokemon that are solid, not amazing, not terrible, over here into the B tier. Makes a lot of sense. Next up, Volcarona. Really good in this format here. There's a lot of Pokemon that don't like it at all. I'm going to put into the A tier. It's always going to see play. Having access to moves like Quiver Dance is obviously fantastic. Still has access to Roost. Has less coverage than its counterpart Iron Moth, but it still is really solid nonetheless. Hurricane, Psychic, your fire moves, of course, your bug moves, you're able to do a lot of damage. And I do find that Volcarona, once you get a Quiver Dance up, it could just be game over basically in most situations. And if ever you're going up against a Corviknight, what am I saying? Why did I say Corviknight? Why on earth did I say Corviknight? It's because it's 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning. Because it is a Volcarona that is bulky, has great coverage, has access to Quiver Dance. If ever you're going up against a Volcarona, you're going to be in a situation that you're going to just break through basically anything, and your opponent has to prep for it really well. Next up is going to be a Vulpix. Now, Vulpix normally went to the NFB tier. However, I'm going to put into the D tier because it is a low tier Sunsetter. If you really can't afford, especially in Draft League, to go with a Torkoal or a Ninetales, you can always go with Vulpix. That's a really solid option to go with like a late round Victory Bell, for example, or in this case, a late round Scovillain as a solid accessible chlorophyll user. So keep that in mind. It is decent overall what it does. Is it great? No, but it has a very specific niche that I think deserves to put it above the NFB tier. So guys, that is my tier list. We have a couple Pokemon in the S tiers. Of course, the God Fuecoco is at the top. Pokemon is goated. I played through Scott about 2 times now. The third time I'm going to play through it with Fuecoco. I really had a good time with the first 2. But of course, I then think that the best Pokemon, the best fire type ever is going to be the Primal Groudon. And I think that honestly, the next 5 after that make a lot of sense to see over here. I think my A tier is pretty spot on as well. If you guys think I deserve to, or what Pokemon deserves to be put higher into the A tier, or if Pokemon is too high, let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to comment your thoughts on the tier list down below as well. And of course, screenshot a picture of your tier list and send to me on Twitter as well. My Twitter is linked in the description, and I'll make sure to retweet it hard and comment my thoughts on it as well. So guys, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys all next time.